Greetings and welcome, retro fans. We have a special interview for you today. My name is Dan Lavoie, retro enthusiast, pixel pusher, and marketing manager here at MegaCat Studios. Joining me today is the esteemed John Lester, co-owner of CollectorVision Games, as well as co-owner of Game on Expo and the visionary behind the popular YouTube channel Gamester81. So here we're going to delve into his extensive experience in the gaming industry, as well as share some of his insights from unique projects and discuss the continuing evolution of gaming. So let's dig into this fascinating realm of retro gaming with John. Welcome.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you having me. It's honor. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on today. We're going to dig in right into some questions to
Sure.
get people to get to know you a little bit here. So you have 10 plus years in gaming in your career, plus, 3, 4 decades of playing retro games. How did you initially become interested in retro gaming?
Yeah, well, I've been playing for, as you mentioned, just since I was five. I've been playing for decades. I'm 42 now, 43 now. So, I've always my first system I ever played was the ColecoVision growing up, and I have a lot of fond memories. This is pre NES, of course, and of course the NES came out, fell in love with it, Super Nintendo, etc. Followed the same path that many of us did as retro gamers, of course, in the 80s and 90s, and then, yeah, to circa 2014 ish, 2013 ish, I created my own game for the ColecoVision, ironically, right? Called Games31, the video game. It took me a while to come up with the title, right? Uh, so did that. Got connected with the crew at CollectorVision Games. Really nice guys. They're up in Montreal, Canada area, and really just fell in love with what they were doing. Was honored enough to join the company, and here we are. 10 plus years later, making games.
Wow, you've definitely been entrenched for quite a number of years then.
Yeah, yeah. Just in terms of just in my channel, game for those who follow me, Games31, you'll know that I'm just a huge fan and a lover of just anything classic games for sure. So
So, moving to that too, in your view, what is the enduring appeal of retro games and why do they continue to have such a strong hold in our audiences today?
for me personally, I think it's two things. I think it's in some cases it's the simplicity of the controls, right?
Mhm,
Uh, these games are challenging. Many of them are like what I call retro hard, right? Like
mhm.
the Mega Man series or the Ghost and Goblins games. Those games are devilishly hard. But it for me, it's the reward of like going through it. And this is back in the day when you had three lives, three continues, and that's it. There wasn't this unlimited you respawn, unlimited like you do in most of games today. So I think that's definitely enduring for me. And second part would be just the nostalgia part of it. Just growing up with these games. And I think the million dollar question is what is retro? Because I think my term of retro is probably very different than someone in their 20s view of retro, right? Because
For sure.
they're probably seeing PlayStation 2 as retro or the PlayStation 3 as retro, and that's in my my eyes, those aren't retro, but it kind of depends on the generation you grew up, right?
Yeah, I know on our end, and even some of the shows I've been on recently, we kind of were looking at modern retro as kind of that, being able to take a game and literally put it in one of those classic consoles.
Right.
And even then, I guess, I still, when I look at retro, I have a similar thing where I kind of maybe do my cutoff right around the Dreamcast era,
Yeah, me too.
you
Turn of the
know,
century. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
so,
But
but even then, I mean, those PlayStation 1, those are also retro to different degrees too. So we're not,
sure.
I don't want to exclude them, but yeah, we're in agreement. These are incredible games and incredible time in gaming. And
Yeah.
I know that you and I are both thoroughly addicted to that era. So,
Oh, for sure. And you look at the jump between the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2, or the Dreamcast, or not the Dreamcast, the Saturn to the Dreamcast, huge graphical advances, right? Huge. Even
oh
the
yeah.
Super Nintendo, the N64 was a huge jump. I feel like PlayStation 4 to PlayStation 5, or the Xboxes jumps there, there's not as advanced jump for me, to
Mm.
be honest. So I think it was we grew up in time where just the evolution of these games were incredible.
Oh yeah, I know. I joked when I bought my PS5 when I was at the store buying. I was like, "How many bits is this again?"
Right,
Right?
right, exactly.
So, you know, so
And don't
let's
get me
we
wrong, I love my
yeah.
PS5, I love my
Oh
Xbox.
yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I play it, but, yeah, my heart's definitely with the retro for sure.
I feel that very deeply.
Yeah.
Continuing that too, like, what are some of the challenges and rewards of developing new games for old hardware?
Well, the biggest challenge is, we have games that we've ported, like City Hunter, for example, to multiple retro platforms, right? City Hunter and the Caverns of Death, for example, has been ported to Super Nintendo, ColecoVision, among other consoles. So, and we're porting over to the NES, for example. So it's not as simple as and even today it's not that simple. But when we have a game through Unity, for example, we can fairly easy port it to modern consoles, right, with a couple tweaks. Where when you're looking at a game from Nintendo to Super Nintendo, for example, you're looking at redoing the graphics, doing the sprites, the color, just the limitations of the systems were just so different. The sound was different, obviously. Genesis sounds a lot different than Super Nintendo, for example. Game Boy sounds different than the NES, as you know. So they'll have their unique tweaks, but I think that's definitely a challenge in that regard. Um, we looked at, for example, Caverns Death for Super Nintendo. We're able to add more levels and more enemies. Where the NES port, we can't do that because of the limitations of the system, right?
Mhm.
Uh, in terms of rewards, though, I mean, it's just the feedback. I mean, the people who play it enjoy the games. That's why we do it. We want to breathe new life into these classic consoles.
So, in your opinion, why is it important to preserve and resurrect games from the past? Like, what do you think adds to the current gaming landscape?
Well,
Like,
it's yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a lot of it's just it's history, and a lot of these games have been lost, in history. And then when we talk about some of these games on CDs, there's the CD rot and all that too. Those are going to be lost at some point, and but we talk about games like Jester that were lost, and many people didn't realize it was lost. So it is. I believe that just the evolutionary process of gaming in general, the history. When we look at the history, if it weren't for Pac-Man, there wouldn't be this, and if there weren't for that, it would be that, right? So these are games. These are the building blocks of gaming today. You
yeah,
know,
these are definitely the foundation that we
right?
stand on. I know here at Retro is, part of our foundation here as well. And, understanding the classic know your roots,
Yeah,
it
right,
holds true.
right. Absolutely, 100%.
So with that, how do you balance the authenticity of retro gaming with modern design principles in your projects or maybe other games you've seen or worked on?
Well, one project that comes to mind is this a game called City Hunter and the Curse of the Mayan. This is the game that we worked plenty of years working, and just recently came out. We just ported earlier this year to the Xbox and the PlayStation 5 and 4. It's currently on the Switch as well. But that game definitely, I would say, has retro roots. Right, it's got the kind of the foundation of retro. It's got kind of a almost a 16-bit kind of feel to it, almost 8-bit slash 16-bit. But then on the same note, we've added modern elements too, right? So it's the ratio is 16:9. It's not 4:3, right? It's the music is chiptune music, of course, but we're able to add a little bit more to it, so it sounds a little bit more modern. We've added a little bit more elements that make it a little bit modern too, where we've added checkpoints. So it's not like what I was talking about before, where you die 3 times and 3 continues, the game's over. There are checkpoints. There's level ups in the game in terms of like ability to level up. So we've definitely taken some of the modern elements of what gamers are used to playing, but we've stuck to like kind of what I call the retro roots.
Cool. Yeah, that's a fascinating kind of look at blending some of those things. I know it's a challenge now when you're working with old hardware to be able to even fit a lot of these things in. I mean, those cartridges and the boards on them have advanced a little bit to help us in some of these productions of things, but
Yeah.
there we are limited. There's definitely still strong constraints when working in these games and putting things out on older consoles.
Ironically, that project actually started off as an NES game. It was going to be called Mayan's Revenge, and it started. We actually have an early ROM of it playing on the NES, and it just like our wild ideas like we should add this and that, and this is nowhere. I think one lesson we learned of making this game is you need to have a plan of action before you start working on the game. Otherwise, you just keep adding and adding, and then eventually got to the point where okay, we'll keep that for the sequel if there's one. But so that game started off as an NES, and we just read out of limitations what we could do with that system. So we're like, okay, well let's try to build this for modern platforms. Just give us a little bit more flexibility, and in which case we did.
Cool. So let's switch gears just a little bit there and kind of dig into you and your YouTube channel. So your channel, Gamester81,
Mhm.
features a lot of retro gaming content. What inspired you to focus on this niche, and how do you choose topics or games to cover?
That's a good question. I started my channel very early on. I think my first video was posted probably in early '09. So definitely feel old saying that, but time flies, I'll be honest. And kind of what got me going, I started at a very good time. I mean, there weren't very many content creators as there are today doing YouTube channels, right? And I remember I've always been a fan of gaming, as I mentioned, playing retro games. I've always collected kind of more niche and unique consoles and systems. And I was trying to go online and trying to find more information about these, like the Bandai Apple Pippin, for example. Like there really wasn't much information about that system, or the Nintendo 64 disk drive. And like at the time, there weren't that much like many reviews. So I got when I got married, one of the gifts my in-laws gave us were a video camera, and so I decided one day to take the camera, and I had zero experience making videos. If you watch some of my earlier stuff, the lighting's awful. I'm saying a lot of ums and hums, and and what it's funny because my earlier videos, I was in a very small, like a one bedroom apartment, and you can hear me kind of whispering because my wife was asleep. I didn't want to wake her up, and it's really, but I think just doing those videos and posting them at the time, the other people were obviously caught interest and it kind of caught on. And obviously James Rolfe and Angry Video Game Nerd was a huge inspiration. He's been doing it forever. So that was just a lot of fun. Just been doing it ever since.
Has your role as a YouTube influencer influenced your approach to retro game development? Like what are some of the challenges you faced in developing games based on limited visual materials and no existing copies and those
Yeah,
things that you deal with in your kind of
I
development
think
roles?
so. I mean, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be co-owner of CollectorVision Games if it weren't for my experience of doing YouTube, to be honest. And I wouldn't be co-owner of Game on Expo, to be quite frank with you, if I wasn't. Just because of my experience of how to market, how to come up with different ideas and just on the fly, and dealing with not just the positive praise but the criticism too. Because when you get more popular on YouTube, you know, every woodwork comes out. Everyone comes out of the
Right.
woodwork, right? And so I think the hardest challenge is when you come up with a game and I post it on my channel, for example. Sure, I get a lot of great job, looks awesome, but then you get a handful of like, oh, that game's like crap or whatever, and everyone's an expert. So I think taking it with a grain of salt, and of course taking feedback and listening to people is of course important, and applying that feedback to make the game better. I'll take all the positive criticism in the world, right? I mean, obviously, but also not taking things personal, I think, is important too. And that's one thing I've learned doing YouTube is you kind of put yourself out there for people, And I've had my share of debacles. I'm sure you're familiar with the Clico Chameleon debacle that happened years ago, which was, looking back on it, was horrible. But you pick up yourself, you dust yourself up, and you have to move on.
That Man, that is not something I had thought about in years. I had imagined, outsider looking in, that was a tough thing to roll through. But I know that I know a lot of people in gaming, not just you, but everyone has kind of had these stumbling blocks that really end up being building blocks to careers and lessons learned and
Yeah.
things that build up a foundation that create some kind of resiliency to survive in this industry.
Yeah, I think my philosophy, I always try to do the right thing. Now, am I always perfect doing it? No, but
Yeah.
try to do the right thing and learn by it. So if I do make no one's perfect, obviously, right?
Mhm.
But if I do make a stumbling or something happens, I just try to look back and say what could I have done better. And I think I definitely apply that to game development too. We've had our fair share of games that weren't great, and we look back on it and like, oh, what could we done better? And then we apply those and fit the feedback, and then we do it to the next game. We make that game better. So no one's perfect, and no one can make a perfect game, to be quite honest with you. But we try to do our best we can.
I have definitely enjoyed a bunch of your games. I think the that kind of passion and that dedication to retro is really bleeds through when you play your game. So, props to you and everyone on your team for putting together some just really incredible titles.
Oh, thank you.
Big fan. So,
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think one thing that I have in common with my colleagues at CollectorVision Games is we love the ColecoVision, and I know it's a very niche system. It did okay when it came out, but it came out obviously during the video game crash of the early '80s, so it's kind of overlooked, right? And if you are a fan of like classic arcade games like Donkey Kong and games like that, ColecoVision is such an awesome system. Really great ports because we're looking at graphically it's between really an Atari and an NES, I would say. It's very comparable to like a Sega SG-100 in Japan, right? A lot of those games are compatible, etc. But it's a great system. So I think that's something we share in common with. But since I've joined CollectorVision Games, we've expanded to NES, we've done Intellivision, Super Nintendo, we're working on a Game Boy game, obviously in modern systems too. We even did I got a kick out of this. We ported Sydney Hunter to the Commodore 64, both
wow,
in cart and floppy disk.
that's
So, that was really cool. I'm like, wow, because I grew up on the N64 or the Commodore 64 and love that. So that was really cool.
That's amazing. I Some of my favorite games I had on floppy drive, I was like some of my early game experiences on an old Pentium 386,
Yeah,
loading in, games with like 5-inch floppies or multiple 3.5-inch
yeah,
floppies, and
right.
that's it's in my blood. I There's something about popping in and it's snapping down a 5-inch floppy
Mhm.
and, letting it click away that is just it
And
like rejuvenates you for,
the load
passion
prompt
for the game. Oh, yeah.
to the
Yeah,
start. I gotta do it again.
you're
Like,
right. Right. Yeah, I still have a pile of manuals from games I had that
right.
were on my 5-inch, 3-inch floppies, so I feel your passion for that
And
era and that
there
time.
are so many great classic computer games that have been lost. To be honest, that we're talking about lost games, and there's just so many because people don't have these computers anymore, and they haven't been for one reason or another they haven't been put in ROM format yet, or they're not an emulator yet, and so there's so many great games out there that have been lost, but hopefully we can someday bring them back.
Well, taking that and transitioning to our next topic, Jester.
Mhm,
This is obviously a project that's both near and dear to your and my heart,
mhm,
and one of the reasons we're here today, so yeah, I wanna dig into Jester a little bit. At, Megacat Studios, you at CollectorVision, how did this partnership with Megacat Studios come about for the release of this game, Jester? And, what is our involvement added to the project? And
yeah.
how has it gone for you? And how has this project kind of come together in your eyes?
Well, first off, I'm a fan of what you all do. I think it's incredible, breathing new life into these classic consoles, and you guys do a great job at it. And just really tip my hat to what you guys do, right? So I've known your guys' product. I've reviewed many of your games in the past, so definitely you guys aren't foreign to me what you guys do. But we wanted to take a game like Gesture and work with you guys because in terms of your involvement, you guys are obviously helping publish it. You're helping with the marketing. I mean, you guys have been amazing to work with. So we're super excited about it. But super excited about Gesture itself because this is a title that probably people listening to this I've never heard of. Right? It's a game that was hugely popular in Canada, and not just in Canada, but just the French speaking part of Canada, mainly, primarily. And it was only through the Videoway console, which I'm sure we'll talk more about in a second. But it's a really fun maze game. I'm a fan of Pac-Man and a Mousetrap and classic games like that. And if you're a fan of those games, kind of bring those back. This is a game I definitely think will pull at your heartstrings because there's so many different things that you have to worry about. It's more strategic than Pac-Man, right? Pac-Man, you gotta get the dots, and you gotta get the power pellets and defeat all the ghosts, right? That's the goal, right? This you have to worry about your torch, your light running out. You got to worry about getting your special items. You got to worry about your swords, your weapons, and getting your clearing the screen. So it's definitely challenging, and each level progressively gets more faster and faster. So it's definitely a fun game. We saw it. My partners I mentioned before are from Montreal. They grew up playing this, so this game was definitely nostalgic to them, and it was challenging because there wasn't much information about this game when even it wasn't on like archive.com. There was really very few footage of it actually that existed other than like some like news footage or there's no ROM of the game. So JF, my business partner, had to create the graphics from scratch and base it a lot on just like memory and so that was challenging, but I think it turned out really well.
Yeah, the only thing that I and we talked about this before that we found that had any type of kind of concrete evidence of this game existing was that it was a video from an old news broadcast that
Right,
covered it. That
right.
was it. That's all we've got. So we've got, your memories and literally a few seconds of game footage.
Then
Uh,
the Videoway was a system very similar to like the Sega Channel in a sense where you could actually download through a cable box, download some games and play it. Dead Tomb was another game that we brought back from Temporal Inc. was known back then, but we brought that back as Dead Tomb, and that was another game that was kind of a point and click game that we wanted to bring back too. Same kind of thing. We wanted to, it's a really fun and simple game, but that game in particular is very challenging because it's like one of those unforgiving point and click games. You got to pick up an item to unlock a certain thing, and it's really fun though.
yeah, Jester has such an unlikely origin story as
Yeah,
far as like a game coming back. I mean, you really revived something from the tombs of gaming history. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this game should be, dead and forgotten. It's
and for
not a small feat.
decades it was dead and forgotten, and so we're definitely excited to be a part of bringing it back. We're playing it, and people who have played it before has been all very positive. So we're really excited about it.
We talked about the game mechanics there for a few moments, but I want to go back to that just for a
Sure.
second, because I think many aren't going to be familiar with Jester as a game. And when you guys had sent over, some of your early copies, and I was playing through it, I was like, man, this is not your typical maze chase Pac-Man game. This
Right.
game has depth and strategy, and you can't just go. You have to plan. Like, you have to figure out where you're going. So, can you kind of again roll through some of these mechanics a little bit and talk about some of the uniqueness that makes Jester and what was the original Le Fou du Roi? What made it so special with those mechanics?
Well, like I said, you have to kind of multitask in this game, right? Each level has 9 different rooms, dungeons, so to speak, that you have to kind of move through. And there's a map, of course, to show you which ones you've been to. But when you get a special item, it'll unlock a door in another room, another dungeon, for example, to get the special item. And you need to collect all the special items. So it will kind of randomly select another item. And then you have to worry about that. Not only have to worry about that, though, but you have to worry about the light because once the light runs out, it's like pitch dark. And to do a maze game in the dark can be very challenging, as you can imagine. So, of course, there's a monitor on the side to show you how much flame you have left, and each room, each dungeon has its own torch. So you got to kind of worry about that. But then also you have these enemies as well to worry about, and you can get a sword and defeat all the enemies, and that's great. But if you don't defeat all the enemies, you can defeat all of them but one. But if you don't, and you go back, they're all going to pop up again. So you got to be worried about that too. So the strategy, really, for me anyway, is try to clear as fast as I can, but also defeating all the enemies, but also worrying about the energy levels too. There's also an energy level you have to worry about too. So there's like a multi-facet, multi-screen, definitely more unique than like Pac-Man or any of the classic maze games you see.
I know when I was going through some of my early plays, I had made to a level point where I got the last item and I needed to return to the stairs. And I was like, "Oh, this will be great. I'll just walk right over to this. It's only like 3 rooms away, no big deal." And then I was exiting the first level, my torch runs out. And
Right.
I knew from memory that I had used every torch between there
Oh
and
no.
where I was going.
Oh no.
So I had to, like, navigate through 3 sections, sans torch. So, you're effectively, like, feeling your way through this dungeon trying to get to the end, and the challenge was exciting. So I was, props to you guys on that. That was
It's
quite the
there's
experience.
no
So,
timer, right? Because if there's a timer, that even add more
oh,
stresses.
yeah, you're the race is on for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. There's
yeah,
no time, but
yep.
yeah, it's funny.
So, with that too, where do you see the future of retro gaming and modern retro development heading in the next few years? I mean, this is something that's clearly alive and well and growing
Yeah.
in popularity.
Yeah, no, I don't see retro interest in retro gaming dying off anytime soon. I think people are always going to be nostalgic for it. What I love, and I see this firsthand at Game on Expo, for example, is you get the younger audience playing these games, right? Whether they're playing with their parents or their friends. So you look at classic Tetris, for example, and you look at some of the people who are winning at classic Tetris. They're all young. They're all like under 20 and doing phenomenally well, which is really cool. So I don't see the interest dying. Where I see retro gaming going though is I think very much what you guys are doing with IM8-bit and just with obviously still publishing on physical, but I see also porting it to modern platforms as well, which you guys have been doing, which is cool. So that's kind of where I see the future of retro gaming is still doing the physical for those like myself who appreciate and love having a physical copy of the game. I can pick it up, blow it, plug it in,
Mhm.
display it on my shelf. But then I also see for those who want the convenience, these same games are available on Switch and on Xbox and PlayStation, and they can take it to go, for example, and that's kind of where I see the future is kind of like both digital on modern platforms and like old school retro.
So, how do you engage with retro gaming community to get like insights or feedback on your projects? And how has the community influenced games you've developed?
Well, no, for sure. We have communities within Facebook, of course. For example, with CollectorVision Games, we have a fan of was it the game fit I should remember this. It's an experience, so it's a game collector vision experience, right? So it's a club that we have where we keep people, we have newsletters, and we have a group on Facebook where people provide feedback, and of course we always listen to feedback, right? But if we listen to everything, we wouldn't get everything done either.
Right.
Because everyone has their next great idea for games. But no, it's great. I mean, people post pictures of their games and what they like about it, or maybe what they didn't like about it, and so hey, you should work on this game next, and so I'm excited because who knows, maybe from this, maybe someone will reach out to and say, hey, this game I remember growing up playing was lost. Can you guys please look into it? Maybe we will. Maybe we'll bring it back, which is really cool. So, yeah, that's kind of what we keep in contact. Of course, through YouTube is also great. We have emails, database we send out as well, and it's good.
John Lester, reviving dead pixels.
Right. Well, it's not just me. It's my team and really the community. So we're super stoked about it.
So one last question here for you before we kind of wrap this up. After, 3 decades in this niche yet definitely evolving sector of retro
Mhm.
gaming, like what continues to drive you in your passion for this?
Uh, to be honest, just the community. Love the community. Love the feedback. It's I do it for the community first and foremost, right? That's kind of my driving passion for it. And it's very rewarding when a game does come out, especially people don't realize how much work, and I know because I know you guys have done a bunch of games, but how much work can go into some of these games and how many years can go into some of these games. We're working on a game, Justice Beaver, man. This game's been around for 10 years and we're still chipping away at it because we know that at the end of the day, we want to make sure the game's quality. We don't want just to rush it, right? Because another challenging thing about like retro gaming that you asked earlier was the challenges. It's different when you burn a game to a board, there's no updates, right? You have to make sure that the game is solid. You got to make sure there's no bugs in the game, and so just taking the time to make sure we play through it and it's a solid game of the day. I think people appreciate that than rushing a game out to the market and then it being really buggy and not being able to be patched.
Yeah, there's certainly a kind of foreverness about popping some of these in. I know that if you develop a game, you put it on a cartridge, and you send that out and you find a bug, a few months later, yeah, sure, we can maybe upload a new version of that. But everybody came before,
Yeah,
has to live in that. So yeah, it's the challenges are there for
yeah.
sure.
And does it happen? Unfortunately, it will happen occasionally. Not as much, which is good, but it unfortunately does happen because we're not perfect, and no
No.
one is. And so we have a group of play testers that help us out, which is great. And they'll try to break the game, which is appreciated because that's the only way, the best way to do it.
Absolutely. All right. So wrapping up, just wanted to give you a second to kind of talk about any projects you have coming up, things you're working on, things you'd like to throw out into the world and get some eyes and ears on.
Yeah. So in terms of CollectorVision games, we're working on a new City Hunter game. This will be for the ColecoVision, and it's Jungle Safari. It's City Hunter, and I don't recall the title to be quite honest with you. It's my partner at JF is kind of spearheading it, but it is like one of the most graphically advanced ColecoVision games that you'll ever see, which is really cool. It almost looks like NES graphics, and it looks incredible. So really, City Hunter, by the way, for those who don't know, he's kind of like our Mario, so to speak. He's like our mascot. We've released probably 4 or 5 different City Hunter games across various platforms, and in some cases, multiple platforms. Same game. So excited for that. We're working on a new retro space shooter, which is cool. And it's going to be for the NES. So it's going to take some of the classic games like Space Invaders. It's going to take games like Galaga and just kind of take it to the next level, which we're really excited about. And that'll be kind of a next NES game that we're working on. Really trying to find some of these lost games, to be honest with you as well. Trying to resurrect some of these games, whether it's from Videoway or other platforms, is our goal. There's a game that for modern platforms called Tiny Night it's kind of a work in progress for the title, but it's a game that it's going to be a 16-bit kind of action platformer, and it's been in development for a while, but we're really excited about that. And now it's going to come to be. It's kind of like graphically, it looks like almost like Hanna-Barbera cartoon graphics, which is cool. And one of my dreams would be to take City Hunter and the cat Chris the Mayan and translate into like a hand-drawn way. We have an amazing artist, Oscar, who's done an incredible job, but it would take a similar amount of time and money. But to make that game and port over to like a deluxe edition, for example, and almost like a Cuphead, where you're almost playing like a cartoon, that would be amazing. And we've talked about it, but it would take some significant resources to get that done in time. But that's the one thing I think eventually we'll probably cross.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. Thank you to all the CollectorVision fans out there that are watching. Thank you to the MegaCat fans that are out there. Thank you to everyone who has spent their time picking up these games, supporting us, supporting the work we do, supporting CollectorVision, supporting MegaCat Studios. Without all of you, none of this would be possible. So we certainly do this for you, and our love and passion for retro is only here because you support it. So. Thank you all
100%.
for.
And Dan, thank you again for the opportunity to team up with you guys, and appreciate you guys keep fighting the good fight and doing a good job out there, because we appreciate you guys.
Well, thank you so much, John. Well, again, thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.